Hope you're having a good day. IB Nation Sports Talk. We're up and rolling. And as you can see, we've got a guest with us right off the top. Once again, he is Mark Heim. He covers Alabama football for AL.com, as well as the host of the opening kickoff on WNSP FM 105.5, 6 to 9 a.m. every weekday in Alabama. Thanks for doing this today, Mark. Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for having me, and looking forward to it.
Yeah, I did mornings for several years myself. I do have to say I'm glad to be living in in the evening time slot once again. How long have you been doing mornings down there?
Man, I can't even remember. I've done some stints in the afternoon as well. I tell people it's not a whole lot of fun being at the studio at 5:30 in the morning, but sometimes
right.
it beats being in the studio at 5:30 in the evening on a Friday afternoon when everybody else is done for the day. So it has its pros and cons, but I ain't gonna lie, it's getting tougher and tougher to get up early.
I bet, especially once the season starts. That's when it really kicks in. I'm sure you have to kind of go on adrenaline sometimes, but I mean, it is nice to have those afternoons free to, do whatever you need to do.
No doubt.
I guess.
No doubt.
Well, we didn't come here to talk about schedules. We came here to talk a little bit about some guys, of course, who used to be here at Notre Dame, who are down there at Alabama now. A little bit of a Notre Dame flavor that moved down south. Let's start with Tommy Rees, of course, the offensive coordinator. How did it go over in February when all this was announced that he was going to become the offensive coordinator down there?
Yeah, I think there was some hesitation, maybe some I think folks were maybe puzzled might be a good word. Like, I think they were wondering. I mean, you got to remember, as you know, I mean, we've had some pretty high profile coordinators come through Tuscaloosa in the last few years. So yeah, I think people, coming off the year in which Alabama had a huge success by the standards of most schools, obviously a lot of disappointed fans in the state. So you go from some questionable endings to some games last year into a new offensive coordinator, and they want answers right away. And you get Tommy Rees. It's probably not the sexiest name Alabama fans would have come up with, but I think as time went on and you learned, and folks down here, they do their homework for sure. Once they learned more about him, I think they were open to the idea of giving the guy a shot. I mean, not that they have much of a choice in the matter, but generally what Steven says, most Alabama fans will take as gospel around here.
But I mean, he is younger, and he doesn't fit the mold of some of those guys like Bill O'Brien, Steve Sarkisian, obviously, Lane Kiffin come to mind, guys who were obviously former head coaches who had that job. What kind of autonomy, I guess, with that offense do you expect Tommy Rees to have?
I think he's going to have a pretty good amount of autonomy. I mean, Saban traditionally more of a defensive guy. You've probably seen him on the sidelines after a while, and I think this is why he brought Rees in. After a while, if things aren't going well, he'll scream, "Run the damn ball," or something that will get caught on ESPN cameras, right? But I think what we learned in the time since he has made that hire public was I think Saban's really looking forward to going back to a more of a pro-style offense. You saw a lot of variations of offenses over the years, whether it was Kiffin or Sark or Bill O'Brien. And I think with Bill O'Brien, what had happened was I think it had gone too one-dimensional throwing the ball, and we're kind of relying on that really stellar quarterback play. Mm-hmm. And you know the names, right? Jalen Hurts, Tua, Mac Jones, and recently Bryce Young. So a lot of capable arms, which might lead into the next be good segue for our next topic, which we'll get to. But I do think with guys like Sark, and it was a lot of RPO. With Bill O'Brien was putting it in the air. I think with Kiffin, it was a lot of hurry up tempo RPO. And I think he's trying to balance it and kind of be a more balanced offense now.
Do you guys during the spring, do you get to see, much practice down there? I'm curious maybe what you were able to, pick up on.
No, no, very limited, and then it's obviously very scripted. Like, I mean, Saban's very controlling, so he knows exactly what media types are going to see. But
Sure.
I will tell you, well, what we saw is, and what Nick Saban has told us is he needs his quarterbacks to not make mistakes. Right? They don't always necessarily have to go win the game for you, which is kind of what we've seen in the last few years, right? With Bryce Young
Right.
and Tua and Mac Jones. But he just needs them to, I hate to use the term because people look at it as such a negative, but kind of manage the game. And so you got two guys really that have gotten the majority of the snaps. Jalen Milroe is kind of your dual threat guy, kind of that Jalen Hurts feel with, but little erratic, makes a lot of mistakes, not great throwing the ball, but a tremendous athlete. Like when he runs, you're like, oh, yeah, I get it, right? The other guy is Ty Simpson, and he's a little bit more, now he can run and he's athletic, don't get me wrong, but a more of a passer, higher ceiling, but still some of the same issues plague Simpson that plagued Milroe, and you probably saw it in the spring game, just mistakes. And so what they both need are reps. So maybe bringing in Tyler Buchner might be counter to that whole argument. You can't get reps if you bring another guy in. So
Yeah.
I think part of it is seeing the evolution of the SEC and what everybody's doing and trying to combat that. So he feels like, I think Saban feels like if everybody's going RPO and everybody's running up and down the field, maybe control the offense a little bit, control the number of opportunities the opponents get. And in order to do that, maybe you got to go a little more pro style, go back old school and be a little more balanced.
Yeah, and I guess one of the knocks maybe on Tommy Rees when he was, completely understand what you're saying with he doesn't want the quarterbacks to make mistakes. The quarterbacks were very managed, I guess, when Tommy Rees was here. And you were talking about them being a game manager, but it also sounds like he hired Tommy Rees for the specific person or for specific reason of being able to manage that quarterback play, sort of play in, play out kind of thing.
Yeah, and you probably know better than I do as far as Rees. The indication we get is obviously more pro style, but a confident guy, really poised, a player's coach, which kind of lends itself to what you were just saying. And so I think he's kind of a quarterback guy, right? So the question is, obviously, I think Buchner comes in with the intent of starting. Why else would you move down here? My only concern, again, this might be a question for you. I might flip it on you, Sean. Well, why is a guy that maybe wasn't ultimately going to start at Notre Dame transferring down with a coordinator that maybe went out and recruited a Sam Hartman? You know what I mean?
Right. And that's a very good question. And we've talked up here, like if Tyler Buchner doesn't end up winning the starting job down there, that wasn't even, was it worth it for him to even make that transfer? And it seems sitting here from where we are that the answer would be no. I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, I mean, in today's college football, I mean, we always talk about kind of Jalen Hurts. I've always said kind of the poster child for what college football is all about. He handled everything the right way. I don't want to bore your listeners with old Alabama history, but he had the job, didn't have the job. He lost it to Tua, and then he came back in and saved the day. And there was all this speculation about transferring, and he said, "Look, I'm going to do what's best for the team." He was like the consummate team player, right? And then when his eligibility, or at least he got his degree and went into grad school, that's when he transferred. Like he did everything and anything and everything you would want a student athlete to do. But I don't know if, I think that time is come and gone, right? With the transfer portal and needing immediate playing time. And if you're not getting your time, you're going to get in the portal. So yeah, I think everybody anticipates that this guy is going to come down and start. Now, does he start game one or week one? Probably not at this point. I mean, if you put a gun to my head and ask me to pick, probably not. But that's not to say at some point he's not going to get some valuable reps and ultimately become that guy.
I imagine that based on the spring game performances that those two guys, Milroe and Simpson, had, that at least the arrival of a transfer quarterback who's got some experience probably went over well. But from a fan standpoint, when you do have, okay, well, we just got the offensive coordinator from Notre Dame, and now we're getting his quarterback, who, as you said, wasn't going to start over Sam Hartman, who transferred in. Like, how did that go over with the fan base?
I think, and again, I think you probably ask 10 different people, you get 10 different answers. But I think for the most part, I think the Alabama fan base knew there was some big issues at quarterback. I mean, Saban didn't necessarily hide it or try to sugarcoat it. Now, that's not to say a guy that struggles in the spring won't make dramatic improvements in the fall, right? It's still spring.
Right.
It's spring for a reason. But
We've
I do
seen that
think
before,
most
yeah.
Alabama fans were looking at all the list out there, best transfer portal quarterbacks. I mean, I think it was a little bit of a relief. I think it's the whole iron sharpens iron thing. I think from an Alabama perspective, you'd rather have too many than not enough. And if it winds up being Simpson or Milroe, then so be it. If it's Buchner, great. I mean, as long as Alabama's winning in contention, winning the conference and in contention for the college football playoff, they'll take whoever.
One of the downfalls, like you were just saying, the fact that you guys didn't get to see very much practice, if at all, is okay. Now all you get is what they call the A game down there, the spring game, and that's really the only impression that people have of those two quarterbacks. It sounded like you were kind of alluding to the entirety of the spring didn't necessarily look much different than the end result there for those guys.
Yeah, the A-Day was certainly a microcosm, if I can use that word I just learned yesterday, a microcosm of what the spring was. And, true, and we mentioned it earlier, Sean, so, fans are used to going out there and seeing a poised Mac Jones or a poised Tua or a poised Bryce Young or a poised Jalen Hurts. I mean, what you saw this spring generally is probably more real-life college football than what you've seen from Alabama. Alabama's been the exception here lately, which is ironic because early in Saban's career, you didn't have such dynamic quarterback play, right? That's only recently been in the second half of his career at Alabama. So, I guess to put it in simpler terms, Alabama fans are spoiled, not only with wins and championships, but with quarterback play.
Sure.
So yeah, there's always going to be a ridiculous expectation, not only for wins, but level of play at certain positions in quarterbacks, numeral una.
Did Rees get much, if any, blowback from that spring game performance of those guys?
No, I don't think it came back on Rees. I think it was all, man, these guys just aren't ready.
Okay.
I think it was these guys just need more reps. I think they certainly trust Saban. You know what I mean? More than any who I mean, if he had hired Big Bird, they'd be like, well, okay. I mean, Nick Saban said so. He knows what he's doing. So we'll give him a shot. But no, I think as time went on and more, like I said, more came out about Tommy Rees. I think people feel fairly confident that they're going to find some sort of middle ground here and put these guys in position to succeed. And I don't want to make it sound like it's a woe is Alabama story. They still have some of the best athletes in the country year in and year out. They're still recruiting the best athletes. But I think naysayers are saying, is Saban slipping a little bit? I mean, you got rid of both coordinators. You didn't get to the championship. It was clearly one of, if not one of the best football teams he's had. I mean, you had the best offensive player in the country. You had the best defensive player in the country. You don't make the playoff. I think that kind of conversation, Sean, has kind of found its way into the narrative, which is he dropped off or others catching him? And the fact that you're bringing in two new coordinators offensively and defensively kind of added a little ammunition to that.
So what do you think? Do you think he's dropped off? I mean, it's not like they got blown out by LSU or anything last year.
Right. So do I? No, I think I don't know if this makes sense. I've said this before, especially even on my show. I don't know if he's fallen off or that team has fallen off. I think everybody's catching up, right? I think Kirby Smart is closing the gap. How do you extend that gap? What can you do that you haven't already done? And that's what's made Nick Saban so successful over the years, right? His ability to adapt and overcome. Way back when, he was screaming about, you can't run the hurry up, no huddle offense in tempo, and you can't allow me not to sub because my guys are going to get injured. And then what'd he do? Well, he brought in Lane Kiffin, and they went hurry up, no huddle. And they went no huddle. You know what I mean? They went no huddle.
Right.
So he's learned to adapt and overcome. He went from pro style to RPO, and then it was a run type RPO, but then he went to the pass type RPO. Now he's going back to pro style. So he's been able to, in a game of, while a lot of guys are playing checkers, he's playing chess. Sure. But, you lost 2 games. Now, granted, Tennessee and LSU had to play like the best games that they could, and you still lost on the final play of each. But you lost 2 games that you were favored in, which kicked you out of the national championship. So you really can't complain about not getting in or being deserving of it. You kind of paved your own way there. You had your shot, and you kind of blew it, not once but twice. So it's a long-winded answer to say I don't think he's dropped off, but I do think there are hungrier teams out there. I think the portal has been good for Alabama. I think he's been right on that, but I do think NIL has been a problem. I think that's hurt.
Right. I mean, he's 71 now. Do you feel like is he getting close to the like when I was thinking about this morning, I was just, there was like a marathon New England Patriots thing on NFL Network today, and obviously those 2 guys are pretty close friends, Belichick and Saban. Like who do you think ends up going longer between the 2?
Wow, that's a great question. I'll tell you this. I don't think Saban has any plans of slowing down anytime soon. And I can't speak to Belichick, but I'll tell you why. Because Saban's one of these guys that said it over and over. He loves the competition. He loves the grind. The stuff that you and I and most people hate, he loves. Like, he gets up every morning, and he said this. He loves the grind of working step by step to get to a bigger prize, right? A bigger goal. He loves that grind, and he's a competitive guy by nature. Everything's a competition. So until he can find something to fill that void, to kind of scratch that itch, I think he's going to continue to coach. Now, he's always said that he will do it as long until he's in the way. If he's the reason that they're falling off, or if he's kind of in the way, he'll step aside. But to this point, I don't think he is. He's as fiery as he's ever been. Now, he's mellowed a little bit. He's learned to show his softer side in some instances, not football related. But even his wife, Terry Saban, said that having grandkids has brought out the softer version of Saban. But I just don't know what he would do. I think it was a year ago, maybe a couple years ago, Sean, it got out that he was talking to ESPN Game Day. And he said, man, he loved the way that it was a team and the way that they worked together. And it was kind of it was an interest of his, but it didn't happen. But he's going to need something to keep those competitive fires burning. And I just don't know what it is.
I've got a couple listener questions that I want to throw to you since we're on the subject of Saban and his future. Irish Chi-Town wants to know if you think that Coach Rees could have been brought in there as the head coach in waiting whenever Nick Saban retires.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible, and thank you for listening. Thank you for the question. I think it's possible. I think it's unlikely. I think when there was a lot of talk for years that Dabo Swinney was the guy in waiting, right? And then it just got to the point where that just kind of felt stale. No disrespect to Tommy Rees, but I think how do you follow, like, what kind of name will it take to appease the boosters and the program and the fans to replace Nick Saban? I know it's not Mark Heim. I doubt it's Tommy Rees at this point. It could be. You win a couple of natties and you're breaking all sorts of offensive records and guys are winning. I mean, it's not out of the realm, but I can tell you, I don't think his hire, I don't think on the checklist was, okay, need an offensive guy, someone who can work with quarterbacks, maybe a pro style guy can replace Nick Saban in 3 or 4 years. I don't think that was one of the requirements for the position.
Sure. And I mean, this is a guy who, all the national championships that he's had, obviously, there was, as you well know, a lot of up and down years before Nick Saban showed up there.
Oh yeah, it was lean times. It was some tough times in Tuscaloosa.
Yeah. We've got a super chat. Wicked Bronco Productions paid $20 for this question. So
wow.
Throw that one up there.
An answer worthy of such a donation. Okay.
That's right. That's right. So he says, thoughts on the Georgia situation. Titles may be stripped and a possible postseason ban and loss of scholarships. Anyways, why do Bama fans think Tommy is better than what he is? Just because he's at Bama now, people view him top 5. So there's a lot there for you, whichever way you want to
Okay,
go.
well, let's tackle the Georgia thing. I think what you see there is the ugly side of college athletics. It probably goes on in more places than it doesn't. And I'm not making excuses. At the end of the day, though, and we could probably do a whole nother day on this topic, what's the NCAA going to do? I guess, and I don't mean to be this blunt, but from a college football standpoint, from winning, from making money, who cares? Is kind of the response that you're starting to get around college athletics. And that's a sad commentary on the sport. I don't condone it, but what are you going to do? Vacate wins? Nobody cares. Nobody cares that they're still going to recognize their championships, their wins. What are you going to do? Vacate it? I mean, okay, so if the NCAA has proven it's got no teeth, it's got all bark and no bite. It doesn't have subpoena power. It can't. The investigation is going to take 2 or 3 years. I mean, we've seen the story over and over in college football. Do I wish it would be different? Sure, absolutely. But I stripping teams or programs of wins in the long run doesn't really matter. I mean, they just recently stripped LSU and Les Miles. I mean, it made a headline for 12 hours, and people moved on to their College World Series baseball championship. They're still talking about the women's basketball championship. They're not talking about whether or not Les Miles is going to get into the Hall of Fame because he had so many wins vacated. I'm sorry, what was the second part? Tommy Rees?
Let me see. Yeah, basically, why do Alabama fans think Tommy is better than what he is?
Well, I'm not sure we knew or Alabama fans knew what he was before he got here. Again, there's still questions, right? So if I said it wasn't the sexiest pick, and I don't even remember who was available at the time, so I couldn't even throw out who would have been a sexier pick. But I think people scratched their head when the hire was made, and then I think there was some skepticism. I'll tell you why people are high on him, because Nick Saban has kind of given his stamp of approval, and generally down here, when it comes to fans, if Nick Saban says it, they take it as law. So, but there are questions, right? So, and the first question, and I posed to you, Sean, was if Buchner is so good, why was Rees recruiting Hartman while Buchner was up there? And if he transferred out of Notre Dame to come here, does that mean the Notre Dame quarterback is better than Alabama quarterback? Maybe so. That's going to be a tough pill for Alabama fans to swallow, even if Notre Dame fans are cheering about it.
Yeah, and Wicked Bronco Productions just keeps throwing super chats at us, which means we have to throw them at you.
All right.
Just keep throwing them up there. He asks how Alabama fans view Tyler Buchner. He might have jumped in late. We talked a little bit about that earlier, but he did. Maybe the bigger thing, kind of to what you were just talking about. He says, I personally don't think he would have gone to Alabama unless he was guaranteed the starting job. What do you think about that part?
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense. I think that's everybody's reaction to that. Clearly, and there's some concerns from Alabama fans, like we just stated, because why are we getting a guy that got beat out? I think is kind of the narrative that you hear. But because Milroe and Simpson have shown the ability or the inability to do the things that Saban wants, the fact that he's bringing in a guy at this juncture, I think Saban feels pretty confident. I saw a stat. I don't know. You probably know better than I do, Sean. I think Buchner had like one interception for every 14.8 attempts in the grand. Yeah. So that's probably a pro as opposed to a con at this point, only because of the issues we were talking about with Milroe and Simpson. So I think a lot of people are saying, at the worst, he doesn't get the starting job, right? Somebody beat him out. So they knew Simpson was one of the highly ranked, not Simpson, I'm sorry, Buchner. That Buchner was one of the highly ranked potential portal guys. So I think they felt like they got as good as they were going to get at that time.
All right, last one from Wicked Broncos Productions. Okay. He also wants to know how you, as an Alabama guy, view Notre Dame this year, and if you think that they're a legit playoff team. And also, he says he's sorry he thinks Tennessee wins the SEC this year.
Man, we're dealing with a brutal heat down here right now. It's like
I know.
ridiculous. It just got hotter thanks to that. Man, I'm not going to share that with my listeners.
Trying to box you through the screen there.
Yeah. I tell you, Tennessee's a solid pick for the SEC. I think LSU, I think a lot of people think Brian Kelly in his second year can do some things. It's interesting because both basketball, women's basketball, and baseball won in those coaches' second year. So here comes Brian Kelly. Here's my problem with Notre Dame, and not that I have a problem with Notre Dame, but I think what's going to wind up ultimately happening is it's really up to the committee. And I think this is the biggest problem we've had with the CFP, right? It's like I said, it's like college, it's like basketball. You want the referees to be consistent in the first half and consistent in the second half. We want these playoff committees to be consistent from year to year. What do you want? Do you want wins? Do you want quality losses? Like, what is it that you want, and what are you leaning more heavily to? Do you take injuries into consideration? It just seems like it's different every week. So I do think Notre Dame, and I haven't looked at forgive me, I've not looked at Notre Dame's schedule. I'm sure it's most of the regulars.
It basically comes down to Ohio State, USC, and Clemson. Those are the three.
I think if you beat Ohio State, and you go in with one, at least just with one loss, I think there's serious consideration. Now it depends on who that loss is, and this goes back to the committee. Who's the loss against? Home or away? Did you get blown out? Like all that. But I think Notre Dame, because it's Notre Dame, people always kind of look at Alabama and they get frustrated with talking heads because they see the helmet and it's about the brand and not about the talent on the field. I think there's a little of that with Notre Dame, maybe not as much as it once was, but I still think when people say Notre Dame, they think positive thoughts about getting the college football playoff. So long-winded answer, because I'm trying to give you your bang for your buck there at $20.
That's right.
I do think consideration when there's just one loss. I think when you and who they play in, then I think all that turns into a negative for Notre Dame.
Yeah, next year it's a much different conversation.
Definitely,
once it expands. This year,
yes.
You still got 4. It's a whole lot different. But,
sure.
Yeah, I mean, you were talking about LSU, and we were actually talking about that same thing yesterday about the second year championship trek and all that. I mean, LSU definitely for an SEC schedule has a fairly favorable schedule this year. I mean, they obviously have to play Alabama, and I think it's Texas A&M and what Ole Miss are probably, like their top 3 game. And Florida State is a non-conference game at the top as well. But I mean, in terms of conference, the schedule is fairly kind to them compared to some other schedules.
Yeah, I mean, they'll still have to go through. I still think that the West, the SEC West, goes through Tuscaloosa, but we always talk about it, and you guys know this. I mean, it's a lot easier to get to the top than it is to stay at the top, and that's not to say it's easy to get to the top, but those teams are hungry. LSU's hungry. They've gotten a little taste now. Tennessee's hungry. Florida's been down a while. Georgia is a big target. I mean, I think Georgia will ultimately be the odds-on favorite to win the league. They're in the SEC East, but Alabama, I think the West goes through Tuscaloosa, and but it's going to be an intriguing, because those are the 4 teams. And a conversation for another time is, I think there were only 2 or 3 teams that in the SEC in the expanded schedule when they get rid of divisions. Only I think it was 3 teams have 3 of the 4 what I consider top teams in the league on their schedule. And Alabama's one of them.
Right.
I think Vanderbilt is the other. Poor guys. But even Auburn, like their permanent league opponents in that new deal are Georgia and Alabama. But there's only 3. And LSU's not one of them, if I'm not mistaken. I don't have it in front of me, but so it's gonna be fun times in college football moving forward for sure.
Before I let you go, would you be shocked if Tyler Buchner is not the starter against, was it Middle Tennessee State? Is that who they open up with?
No, I mean, nothing surprises me anymore. I don't know. Shocked would I be surprised? I might be mildly surprised. Sure. But probably not shocked, because like I said earlier when we first started, it wouldn't surprise me if Buchner is is starting at some point in this season. Now, look, I'll hand it to Milroe and Simpson. They didn't exactly jump in the portal when news came that Buchner was coming to Tuscaloosa. So either they're gotten some really bad advice, or maybe they've seen the film and been like, man, I can beat this guy, or I can beat both these guys. So it should be as intriguing a fall camp as we've had at Alabama for a long time for this point alone.
For sure. Quarterback derbies always fun to be watching and covering.
Absolutely.
Hey, Mark, again, I appreciate you doing this tonight, and some great stuff from you. Again, Mark Heim from AL.com and also WNSP FM, doing the morning show from 6 to 9 a.m. Appreciate you, Mark. Thanks a lot. Take care.
Hey, enjoyed it. Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. All right. So that is Mark Heim, and that'll let me bring in some other guy, Jesse Stiers. How are you doing?
Doing well. It's been an easy Thursday, so I can't complain.
Did you absorb all that in the background? What do you think?
Yeah, I was here for probably like 10, 15 minutes or so.
Wicked Bronco Productions flashing up a lot of
yeah, he's dedicating the dough today.
That's right. Big time. Well, you want to do some rapid fire?
I think it's the perfect way to end this show.
All right, let's do it. So, got a few interesting nuggets here to start things off. So, Mike Berardino, friend from the South Bend Tribune, talked with Notre Dame great Tim Brown this week. Brown had something interesting to say about something new with the Irish football program this year. Quote, they're doing something this year that they've never done before, where they are teaming the guys with veteran guys. End quote. Brown is going to be paired with Tobias Merriweather. He's going to be paired to mentor Tobias. So what do you think about this new mentor program and what it could mean for a guy like Merriweather?
Yeah, I think that this mentor program is a tremendous idea, especially considering the pedigree at which you're at. And I guess I'm surprised that that Notre Dame hasn't done this before. And I would be curious to know if they're doing it, if other colleges are doing it. And then to me, this just sounds like a big Marcus Freeman idea, right? Because it seems like he like as soon as I read that question, I was like, okay, Marcus Freeman definitely had his hands all over this, right? Like this was 100% his idea, because his whole mission as a head coach is developing relationships, developing the players, etc. And he knows that when these younger guys come into the school, there's a lot of pressure on them, right? Like you're a big time recruit, you have academic standards, you have the athletic standards that you need to live up to. And for someone like Tobias Merriweather, and not even Tobias Merriweather, it goes for kind of everyone of, these are all 3, 4, 5 recruits, star recruits. It's nice to have someone there that's been through it and has had to go through, the struggles of what it means, particularly to play at Notre Dame, to have the spotlight on you, to have the expectations on you. And when you can have someone that's had the success, I think it's a great opportunity for someone like Tobias Merriweather. I think it can help these guys calm down just a little bit more at the end of the day. And I think that's the most important part, is calming some of those nerves.
Right. Like maybe Brady Quinn pairs up with, not necessarily a Sam Hartman, but, one of the younger quarterbacks or something
right.
like that, whether it's Kenny Menchie this year or CJ Carr next year, something like that. That'd be really
Kyle
cool.
Hamilton in the secondary.
Yeah.
Manti Te'o as a linebacker.
Exactly. There's still, it's
take your pick with any offensive lineman in the NFL that you want.
That's right. That's exactly right. Like Zach Martin with offensive linemen.
Golden Tate would be another good wide receiver.
Yeah. And it's like Marcus Freeman's willingness to connect the current team with players from the past and really making it a priority. He's done this from day one, like with all the guys from the past coming back to the spring game last year and just more connection with that. And, great players from the past matter. And, like Notre Dame's last Heisman Trophy winner, Tim Brown, matters, that kind of thing. The guy had 9 1,000-yard seasons, played in a Super Bowl in the NFL. And there's so many others, like whether it's Jerome Bettis or Reggie Brooks, who's around quite a bit. Rocket is all these different guys. It's just so I think it's a really cool idea, and I think you're absolutely right from what you said right off the top. The fact that this had to have started with the head coach Marcus Freeman and prioritizing this, and it just feels like this can be just such a great resource for these young current players to be paired up with, because there are so many, players out there from the past, greats that they can pair them up with if they need some help with something. Yeah, and like Stymie says, Samardzija retired from Major League Baseball now, and he was obviously on the Cubs with the White Sox for a year as well.
He'd be great for Drake Bowen.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I was going to say I forgot about Drake Bowen being a two-sport guy, but that's exactly right. Whether it's him or Golden Tate as well, either one of them with two-sport guys.
I liked
in terms of balance and stuff like that.
Someone said that Michael Floyd should hop in there, and I think Michael Floyd should get in there and be the mentor to the guy that needs to be your big physical, like possession wide receiver. Because I think Notre Dame has been lacking that kind of the last couple of years.
Yep, that's right. Vince hanging out in the chat tonight. Trouble.
He was Vince wanted to get an ear on that hot interview that you just did.
I guess so. I've got a few different things. Let me see. I'm going to say I've got a couple start up here. I guess I'll get to those a little bit later. Let's roll into the next question, though. Fill in the blank. It's blank that Notre Dame's 27-27 record against top 25 teams ranks 10th in the nation since 2010.
For me, that is pretty on brand for who Notre Dame is, to be honest. And I'm not trying to offend anyone here. I think we've all watched Notre Dame football long enough. Notre Dame will handle, just about 10 to 15 in terms of ranking. And then I would say 1 through 10 is kind of where they struggle a little bit more, like they handle the games that they're probably supposed to and struggle in the games, like the very top tier games, whether that's a New Year's Six bowl game, whether that's, top 5 opponents. That's always been, Notre Dame's kind of kryptonite or the backbreaker is they don't necessarily win the high leverage games all the time. And I'm not saying that they lose all of them, but it seems like they more so take care of opponents 10 through 15 than they take care of opponents 1 through 10. And I think that's 27-27 is kind of like that perfect balance that shows that, in my opinion.
Right. And that's, again, like this is Jason has a very Notre Dame fan answer. He says it's not good enough.
It is, but like when you think of top 10 in the country, that's not bad.
They're top 10 in the country. Like Alabama has a 785 winning percentage. Ohio State 750, Oklahoma 666, Clemson 642, LSU 630, Georgia 573, and then that's number 6. Oregon is number 7 at 563, Oklahoma State 550, Stanford at number 9, 525, and then Notre Dame. And now Stanford's is coming down. Again, this is the last 13 years. So like Notre Dame's has climbed over the last 13 years. Stanford's is coming down with the drop-off they've had over the last few years. But, I do think that could they be better, based on what you're talking about? Absolutely. Don't forget, though, Clemson was number 1 in 2020. They were number 4 last year when Notre Dame beat them. So, you definitely like to see them beating some of these other teams at the top, the Alabamas, Ohio States, and Georgias, especially Ohio State this year, obviously. But who's not on the list? Michigan is not on that list. USC is not on that list. Your Florida States, Penn States, those kind of schools are not on that list. So, like, you can disregard, the wins against ranked teams if you want, because they do need to start doing better against the elite teams, especially when it's on the big stage. But at the same time, I think it's very, like narrative is that Notre Dame doesn't beat any good teams, but they're 10th in the nation over the last 13 years and actually beating teams that are ranked at the time they play.
Again,
so that is something, that does say something about your program.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of just the epitome of who Notre Dame has been the last 15 years of being a really good team, definitely above average, definitely, like top 10 is top 10, right? But I think it's, again, the epitome of they're on the doorstep of being elite. And I think in order to be elite, you got to win more of those top 10 games.
Absolutely.
Essentially.
Absolutely. And that's where, with the recruiting going where it is right now, and with Notre Dame already able to win some of those games, you would expect that they are going to start becoming much more competitive and winning more of those games against, the top 5, top 10 type teams, and not just teams from, like 11 through 25, like you were talking about. Absolutely. Yep. I do expect that they're going to start winning more of those games here.
Same. And I think that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, exactly. So Miller Kopp just finished his college basketball career at Indiana. Kopp had an interesting tweet yesterday when he said, "Before every Big Ten game, I asked the assistant coach one simple question. What are the 3 most important things for us to do to win this game?" And then he ran through 3 things for each of the Big Ten opponent, each opponent from the Big Ten. Again, he played at Indiana. Here's what he said about Penn State, the assistant told him. Number 1, no threes. Number 2, no threes. Number 3, no threes. And then number 4, you got a bonus since 1 through 3 was all no threes. Stop over helping and pray they miss. And I'm giving Penn State, of course, because that was Micah Shrewsbury's team that he was talking about the last 2 years. So what do you think that means for Notre Dame?
I think what that means for Notre Dame, and it's unfortunate that Vince is here right now, is they're going to play a lot on the perimeter. There's not going to be a huge emphasis of being, having a cog down low that you're just feeding all the time and working inside out. It's going to be working inside and maybe have a guy down there to catch rebounds for all the shots that you're going to be putting up. And I don't necessarily dislike that. I think that with the athleticism that Shrewsbury is getting in, like, I don't mind if you're going to take a lot of shots, but get back in transition and play really good defense. And you got to be able to do it.
That's the thing. And Vince is booing right now. And I'm sorry, Vince. I'm sorry, 80-year-old Vince. But the game of basketball is played behind the 3-point line now. It doesn't matter. Like, he wanted to knock Mike Bray all the time for all the offensively. I don't think it's going to look a ton different. Where it's going to look the most different. And Micah Shrewsbury told us this last week. We're going to come at you and we're going to fight you. That's what Micah Shrewsbury said. It's going to look different on the defensive side of the ball. And that should make Vince and a lot of other people happy. Live by the 3, die by the 3. Well, they went to 2 Elite Eights, living by the 3, dying by the 3. And again, Vince, I'm sorry, but that's the way the game is played now. It's like the mid-range shot is a thing of the 1980s. That was your grandpa's, college basketball, was the mid-range shot. I don't think it's going to look a ton different offensively, but again, defensively, I think is where we're going to see the biggest difference. Like, Mike
These
Bray,
guys are going to be in very good shape.
Yep, in very good shape. And, again, like Mike Bray, he tried to focus a little bit more on defense the last few years, but didn't quite find, that wasn't quite as appealing, I guess. And I just think Micah Shrewsbury's teams are going to come out. They're going to defend you, but they're also going to put up a lot of shots, and you're going to have to defend that.
I think the number 4 was actually more interesting. The part where they said, pray that they miss. You only say that when a team has a reputation that they're making
the shots,
and then also over helping means that more than one guy can hit the shots, because if you're over helping, that means a double team's coming, you're going to kick to a wide open guy, and that guy's probably going to make it too. So to me, it sounds like Micah Shrewsbury is going to be a shooting team, and it's going to be a multiple array of guys that can shoot. It's just not going to be one guy, and they're going to play fast, they're going to play physical, and they're going to play hard-nosed defense the entire game, and probably it sounds like at least a half-court press, the type of pressure that they're going to put on opponents.
Look, my biggest criticism of the program the last few years, basically since the Leshevsky-Goodwin crew came in, I guess that was almost 6 years ago now at this point, was the lack of athleticism, with the exception of Blake Wesley, JJ Starling, and a little bit here and there. There was just a stunning lack of athleticism. all these guys that Micah Shrewsbury brought in, size and athleticism. It's going to look a lot different.
Well, it's just frustrating because look at what got Mike Bray there. Bonzi Colson, Jeremiah Grant, Pat Connaughton, just guys of extreme athleticism, guys who could do a lot of different things on the court, a lot of versatility in their game. Like Pat Connaughton could shoot on you, but he could also fly above the rim and grab a putback and slam it home. Who was it Vastoria, the babyface killer? Like he could also had sneaky athleticism. It just felt like none of these guys the last 4 or 5 years had that athleticism, and they could really only do one thing. They weren't versatile enough. And I think that's the big difference you're going to see in Shrewsbury.
Yeah. You're going to see a lot more two-way type stuff. Decaf 18 asks if it'll be run and gun. I don't know necessarily run and gun, but again, they're going to shoot the ball. And I think the signature of the team, especially this year, with as young and as relatively inexperienced as they're going to be, is going to be, the defensive effort that I think you're going to see. It sounds like night in and night out. Speaking of Notre Dame hoops, fill in the blank. It's blank that according to College Hoops Today, they're going to play a home-and-home series against Georgetown, beginning with the 2024-25 season.
It's electric that they're going to play an opponent like Georgetown. They haven't played Georgetown, obviously, since their days in the Big East. And I feel like that is a very not that, it was some classic matchup every time Notre Dame and Georgetown played each other in the Big East. But that's a solid basketball matchup. And Georgetown is always a reputable school when it comes to college basketball. And so when you add another quality opponent, listen, Shrewsbury's got to add those opponents and get some strong out-of-conference games in there to help bolster, the resume. He's got to go through the ACC gauntlet every year of North Carolina, Duke, et cetera. When you have to play a tough conference schedule, it's nice to also have, at least a very good, again, out-of-conference opponent to put on the schedule that will help you, in the long run come March when you're trying to get into the tournament.
Yeah, I think it's great because, as you said, it's been since the Big East days. They haven't played since 2013. They obviously used to play all the time back in the old Big East days. And now you got two new head coaches, Micah Shrewsbury showing up here at Notre Dame. You got Ed Cooley, of course, who was at Providence, going to Georgetown, and they hooked it up. And I think it's a nice non-conference type game. To me, especially the fact that it's home and home, it's much more appealing than some of the other opponents that we see come in here.
Yeah, and it's like Mike Bray had him playing against some of these weaker schools, and then they'd struggle against them, and it's like this is a lose-lose ultimately for Notre Dame.
Right, and especially that does not help you when the ACC has been down the way it's been the last couple of years.
Right.
You need to both test yourself and you need to you build your non-conference as well, because it's just, you haven't had some of these ACC schools to prop you up the way they did in the early days of Notre Dame, basically joining up with the conference. It's been a lot different the last couple of years, a lot more parity.
Irish Chi-Town brought up a good point, and it's funny that Vince is in here. Notre Dame might not be the best team, which we know they're not going to be one of the best teams, but they're going to be a very good conditioned team, and I think a team that brings a lot of effort. And it's funny, because that's basically what Vince told us in our freshman football year. We weren't going to be the best team, but damn it, we were going to be conditioned. And I'll tell you what, that was probably the best shape I was ever in my life, because Vince and Jory would love, they would sit there and laugh and watch us all run and suffer together. But hey, we never got tired. I could play both ways, so it worked out.
Is that Coach Vince or Coach Taylor that you're talking about there?
Coach Vince.
I'm in season 5, the final Friday Night Lights season of the rewatch right now. We got about half the season to go, so see what happens. This is the Lions have gotten good in year 2 under Coach Taylor, so rewatch continues. Lindy's Magazine had a curious quote from an anonymous SEC coach about the new pairing of Texas A&M head coach Jimbo Fisher and his new offensive coordinator Bobby Petrino. Here's what the anonymous SEC coach had to say. The Jimbo Fisher-Bobby Petrino marriage sounds like a Nightmare on Elm Street scenario, doesn't it? I know them both. and they're both single-minded, the coach said. It'll be interesting to see if Jimbo will keep his butt out of the way. Petrino is not a feel-good Mr. Happy type of guy, but he's a great offensive mind. So, what do you think about how this is going to work down there at Texas A&M?
I think Texas A&M is either going to go down burning in flames in a year or two, or they're going to completely flip it around and win the SEC in a year or two. I don't think there's really a middle ground. I think that it's extreme low or extreme high. And I think that, the quote from this magazine, I think is pretty spot on. I think Jimbo Fisher and Bobby Petrino, definitely Bobby Petrino, they're like two alphas in a room, right? Like they're not really guys who sit back and listen to what other people have to say. They're going to do it their way. And if you tell them to do something different, they're probably going to tell you to go get lost, right? And I think that's what's going to be the biggest struggle with Jimbo Fisher, is just biting his tongue and letting his offensive coordinator be an offensive coordinator.
Yeah, and that's
it's one thing if it's a young offensive coordinator, but it's Bobby Petrino. He's been around the block for a long time. Like he could be the head coach technically of Texas A&M.
If he had a Tommy Rees in there, it would be one thing. But basically you've got two old cusses, who are, and you just know that they're gonna butt heads at some point. It's coming, and that's why I pick option A with what you're talking about. I think it is all gonna flame out here pretty quickly. Like if Jimbo doesn't get this thing going, after all the stuff with the recruits and the NIL and everything else the last couple of years, he doesn't get this going, I think that it all does go up in flames. And it just seems like adding, a very experienced coach, but a very experienced former head coach into the mix. And as Chi-Town said, infamous reputation. This guy he's been around a little bit, and he's burned some bridges where he's been in the past. So I think it's good. I think it's just a very potentially flammable situation, and
it's just one of those boom or bust moves. And I think it's because of what you were talking about. Texas A&M and Jimbo Fisher are struggling right now. They're grasping for what they can do to get it turned around. And I know Jimbo is feeling the heat from those boosters because he got a lot of money to come coach at Texas A&M and in the big state of Texas. So there's a lot of expectations, and you only with a lot of expectations, you got to bring something to the table. And I think that's what they did with Bobby Petrino. And it's either really going to work out or really not going to work out. So
Derek says sliced bread said they will flop. I mean, if sliced bread says it, wasn't that one of the ones that Jimbo was calling out, when he was like a year or so ago, when he was talking about sliced bread and this and that. And
it wouldn't surprise me. It sounds like something Jimbo Fisher would say.
Bro Bible and all that kind of stuff. So here's a question we got from Mark Avalone during the mailbag show yesterday. Vince doesn't follow the NFL as much as we do, so I thought that I would bounce it to you and see what you think first. So Mark asks, do you think the NFL will ever develop a max contract to solve the quarterback salary headache?
So is it essentially saying like how NBA players kind of have a super max deal? Like you basically you create a ceiling and you can't go much beyond it.
Yeah, and I mean the NFL, the way things are set right now with the salary cap, and once you sign the quarterback, once you decide you have a franchise quarterback and you sign it, like the top, however, what the percentage is, all the top contracts are going to quarterbacks right now. The highest paid players are all quarterbacks. And it creates such a huge salary cap issue once you sign the quarterback to be able to, sign anybody else and keep them on the roster. I think they need to do, like I've said before, maybe you treat the quarterback as its own separate thing, like you're saying, whether it's a max contract or whatever you want to call it. They need to find, some way to rework this so that you can afford to both keep the franchise quarterback and be able, to put a competitive rest of your roster on the field.
So here's my thoughts. I think that long story short, I don't think that it'll ever change, unfortunately. I think that it would benefit NFL teams if they did do something like we're talking about. And quite honestly, I understand that the quarterback right now is obviously the most important position. And look at Patrick Mahomes, essentially. With no Patrick Mahomes, do we really think the Chiefs have this window that they've been on? The Super Bowls, etc., the Super Bowl appearances, all of the success. My answer would be no, but I live more in the Tom Brady philosophy. I think if you really want to be great and you want the rest of your team to be great, then there's no reason for you to like that money. You should be open to not taking as every penny as possible and redistributing that wealth to the rest of your team.
Jason agrees with you, but at the end of the day, part of the reason that he ended up getting out of New England, one was I think, he had been married to Bill Belichick for too long, but two was he had never had the big payday. And so he went out and he took the big payday from the Buccaneers, obviously, and he ended up winning a Super Bowl with them. But what happened in years 2 and 3 in Tampa? They got steadily worse every year. My only counter to what you're saying about him taking the discounts in New England is it helps when you have a supermodel wife who is making, $20 to $30 million a year herself. Most other quarterbacks don't have that luxury, unless maybe you're Russell Wilson. It's those two. It's a very short list of quarterbacks who are willing to do that, and it's a lot easier to take those discounts to let your team continue to do what we're talking about, field competitive teams throughout the rest of the roster, because you have a wife, a spouse who is making multi-millions herself.
Yeah, and I get that too, but at the end of the day, you got to look at the quarterback position. It's the most popular position in the whole sport. I think that outside of a contract, these guys can still get things done because of their appearance, their face, and everything else. So it's like these guys can get brand deals and commercial deals and etc. too, to kind of get some of that extra money outside of an NFL contract. But I do think that the NFL can't sustain the rate that it's going with these NFL contracts. Like it can't keep going up, and that's the thing is everyone gets all up in arms when a quarterback gets a new deal. But listen, it's just the time of when their contract expires and what the market value is. And that's ultimately what the issue is the market value is just too high, and the ceiling just keeps getting raised year after year after year.
Derek Carr and Kirk Cousins were both the highest paid players in the NFL at one point when they signed their new contracts. And then every time a quarterback signs a deal, the next one is going to get more. That's just the way it works. But again, that's what they've got to do something to change the structure of what they're doing. Quinn asks if this is a Foo Fighters shirt. It is. This is the original Foo Fighters logo that I've got on here tonight. By the way, someone asked last night, I think they said it was something to the effect of someone paid $8,000 for a pair of Taylor Swift concert tickets.
Oh, boy.
Is there not that you would necessarily pay $8,000, but who would you pay the most to go see? Say it's $500 a ticket in that ballpark. Is there an act that you would pay to see that much?
Yeah, so I would go see. I'm a huge.
John says Motley Crue.
See, this is the issue. This group of people is more of a little older school. I'm more of a new school.
You're saying more classic rock.
Yeah. I enjoy the classic rock. Like if I had to go to a concert, how about this? If I had to do it, I'll do an old and a past, because you used to play a lot of music when we were driving around, and so I don't dislike classic rock music. I just don't listen to it as much, and I don't know the names and the songs, but if you put it on, I'm like, okay, yeah, I like this. Uh-huh. I'd love to go to a Guns N' Roses concert. Back in the day. That would be pretty fun. Yeah.
They're going to be at Wrigley Field here, and within, if you're interested,
I didn't know that.
They are. I might have to check that date because I haven't been able to get anyone interested in going. So
Decaf beat me to the punch on the current. It's not the Backstreet Boys. I'd like to see a Drake concert. I think that would be my current music. If I had to go with, that's who I'm really into in terms of hip hop, rap, etc. I've always been a huge Drake fan. So if he did like a joint concert with some like another artist that I would like, I think that would be where I would spend my top dollar.
Okay. I didn't realize.
Also, did you see
would be on your list
this weekend in Cincinnati? I got sent this because I'm actually leaving for Cincinnati after our show today. Taylor Swift is in Cincinnati this weekend. There's a Reds game sold out in Cincinnati this weekend. There's a FCC Cincinnati game sold out in Cincinnati this weekend, and they're the league leader in the MLS right now. And it's 4th of July weekend in Cincinnati. So what I'm saying is I am just entering a pool of just craziness down in Cincinnati this weekend. So when you said Taylor Swift, that's what made me think of it, because she sold out in two shows this weekend.
DJ says Motley Crue is a great live show. It's been more than 30 years, but I saw them when I was in Germany as well. Didn't get down in the mosh pit like I was talking about last night with Living Color and REM, but did see REM at a bigger, or not REM, but Motley Crue at a bigger arena. What was the other one that I saw? Derek says, Jesse, the question was musician, not performer. Drake is disqualified.
Derek, we get into a lot of arguments, but
guns blazing.
We can look at all the top 100 boards and the most number one singles of like the last 20 years. Bring up the stats. I'm a stats guy.
Quinn also says $200 for that hat.
I would flip a pretty good profit on it, but this is like a one of one hat for me. I don't think I'd ever let it go.
Not going to give it up.
I think I would pass it down generations.
Quinn also said he saw Foo Fighters at Wrigley in 2018. Great show. I wanted to see that. I want to say that might have been during the football season already, and so didn't make it to Wrigley. But I did see him for the first time in Indianapolis. I think that same year, probably that same tour, if I remember right. But we had tickets to see them again in 2020, but things got shut down, and they just announced, they're doing like these, they're not on traditional tour, but they just announced a tour for 2024. I see they've announced a bunch of international dates, haven't announced the dates over here in the US just yet for next year. So looking forward to that. Hopefully it works well. Was it July? Okay. Well, I think it's probably just because we ended up seeing him in Indy. Still a good show.
I like that last comment by DJ Armageddon. A little too soon, but I chuckled.
If I were to pay Titan Submersible money to ever see my band, it would be Hendrix and the Experience or Zeppelin. Well, okay. All right. Well, that's going to do it for tonight. Good stuff, Jess. And of course, thanks to Mark Heim, who joined us earlier from AL.com. Some good information from him about Tommy Rees, Tyler Buchner, and Alabama as well. And of course, if you jumped in late, you can go back. You can still watch it. You can listen to it wherever you happen to be. But hit that like button if you would on your way out tonight. You said you're going to be in Cincinnati, Jess. So are you still with Vince and I tomorrow night?
Packing up the gear. I'll be there.
All right. Sounds good. Appreciate it. Thank you as well, Jason, and to everybody else as well. Appreciate you guys as always, and we will talk to you tomorrow on the IB Nation Sports Talk Friday Rapid Fire.